He abused me for as long as I can remember. He would tell me it was our little secret. I'm sorry, but your mum doesn't give it to me anymore.
No.
He was a violent man, and he, when he was abusing me, was very aware of his genitals as a man and was very proud of them. I had a phone call come up from the victim liaison officer. Oh, and he's given us permission for you to know that he's now Claire Fox. He's a woman.
That must have been a shock.
He came out as transgender. And so now to be told that he's walking around in a wig with the same genitals intact that he used as a weapon against me, but I have to call him her, is absurd. And the thought that he now can tell people that the reason he did what he did was because maybe he felt a bit like he should have been a woman. And he has a clear DBS because they type in Claire Fox on the system and nothing's there.
He can avoid this.
Yeah, I fought it, and I fought it hard.
You wouldn't have had to. What was it he said about Jimmy Savile?
He turned around and went, that was probably the first time I've ever felt like I hated him.
Do you think there is a part of Clive that believes that he is a woman? Take us through your story.
So in 2015, I was at home and the police showed up out of nowhere. They came to collect indecent images that they'd found online that my father had been taking of me throughout my childhood. They had tracked him for months online because he was sharing these images with other pedophiles, but they had no idea about what they were about to uncover, which was years and years and years of sexual abuse that he'd put on me. Since then, obviously, as it would be, it's been up and down. But recently, a couple of years ago, he came out as transgender. And that's kind of what has led me to here, really.
It's quite extraordinary. How willing are you to talk about the abuse itself? You don't obviously have to go into exact detail, but when it started and how old you were.
So when it started, it's really difficult because anybody who's been through anything traumatic knows that your brain blocks things out. It's like a coping mechanism. So for me, he abused me for as long as I can remember. I've always been abused. For the police, they legally documented it from 6 years old. They have said to me that they feel like it was from birth. He groomed me from birth. So when I was growing up, he used to tell me stories about how I was his favourite and how he would take me, as an 8-month-old baby into a different room to share his pudding. And it was, obviously, as a child, you're like, great, I'm the favourite, But as an adult, you realise actually that was the start of it all, and that was like the grooming process. And he did it for years, and it was always me. It wasn't any of my other siblings, which I'm really grateful about. But that doesn't mean the threat wasn't there. It was always, if you don't do what I want you to, I'll go to your younger sister and I'll do it to her. Wow. So even though there was like the one side where I was, as a child, was like the favourite and, had all these things, it was also very much when I started to be like, actually, this is wrong and I don't want to do it. If you don't, someone else will. So, for as long as I can remember, there's so much more that I have never told and I think would struggle to tell, purely because that's how I cope with it. It didn't happen. I was not in that room when that happened. In my brain, that's how I kind of feel. But a lot of it was like indecent images. He used to make me masturbate him. As a child, he would then masturbate me. He would do other things. He would tell me it was our little secret. And his famous phrase was always, I'm sorry, but your mum doesn't give it to me anymore. And
no.
Yes. So that was the common one, was blame. It wasn't his fault because my mother wasn't having sex with him, so he was getting it elsewhere. And that was a big one. And that's why now I'm so against people who are like, I'm sorry, but you're either sorry, but you're not, or you're not. There's no but there. So there was loads of things, but he would make me type online to who I thought was an 11-year-old girl on MSN. He used to make me sit on him naked, type into her. She would tell me everything's fine. This is normal. This is what we do, for our parents when we love them. The 11-year-old girl turned out to be another paedophile from Manchester who obviously was grooming me as well. So it was everything, from images to actually, sexually abusing me. He didn't stop at anything. He was getting what he wanted, and he didn't care about who he hurt along the way.
Was anybody else aware? Did they start to become aware, siblings, your mum?
No. I'm one of 8. So
wow.
Yeah. So I have 3 sisters and 4 brothers. They actually think he picked me, which is why it was just me. That's why he groomed me from birth. He decided that it was me, almost like a bit of a sacrifice child. He had 3 other daughters and 4 other sons to care for. So what's it matter if one, gets used for what he wants?
Were you the youngest or
the middle?
Middle.
So yeah.
It feels like this because I'm trying to understand his head. I don't know why I'm trying to do that.
Yeah.
Are we talking about a psychopath, somebody who feels no empathy?
Yeah, I think that was it. And I think that there's a lot of evidence from how he reacted along the way to suggest that. So one of the things was when he was arrested, the police officer in charge of the case told me that he was crying on the interview tapes when he was first arrested. I don't know what I've done. I don't know why I'm here. I haven't done anything. And then they would pause the interview tapes and he would sit up in his chair and he'd say, "You're never going to get me for this." He just did not care at all.
So was he quite a strange and difficult character outside of all of that as well, just as a parent?
Growing up, obviously being one of 8, a big family, it wasn't nice. We were neglected as children, all of us. I had a really, really poorly little brother. He was born with half a heart. So obviously the rest of us kind of were just left, and we only got through it because we had each other. So at home, he certainly was neglectful. He was aggressively violent to especially my younger brother. He wasn't afraid to hit, punch, slap, do whatever he needed to do. I actually remember one occasion when my younger brother threatened to phone social services and the police on him, and he said, "Do it," and passed him the phone. So my brother, being quite confident at the time, did it. He phoned 999. Clive took the phone off him and punched him square in the face. And told him never to do it again. And that was that. That's the type of man he was. He didn't care. It was very much power. Look at me, I'm bigger and stronger than you, and I'll do what I want to do.
And all that while, I mean, it's a stupid question, but for what we're going to go on to speak about, it's relevant. He felt presumably very much a man.
Yeah, he was a man. He was Cockney. He used to wear his big leather jacket. In the community, he would make himself known as quite hard. He would walk around. He was arrested multiple times for domestic incidents. There was a time he actually held us all hostage in our home. He put a brick through the window at my niece, who was a newborn baby.
Oh my God.
He was a violent man. And when he was abusing me, was very aware of his genitals as a man and was very proud of them. And so now to be told that he's walking around in a wig with the same genitals intact that he used as a weapon against me, but I have to call him her, is absurd.
It's completely insane. What was it he said about Jimmy Savile, like when you were growing up?
So I remember this moment. I can tell you exactly what I was wearing. I was in my pajamas. I was sat, we had a sofa here and here. He was sat here, I was sat there. We were watching the TV and Jimmy Savile, the news broke out about it. I was having my tea and he turned around and went, "People like that make me absolutely sick. I don't know how they get away with it." And that was probably the first time I've ever felt like I hated him. And it was because I was like, that is you? What do you mean? I was so blindsided growing up because he was my dad. And nature tells us we love our parents. We should love our parents. But actually in this moment, I saw him as a monster and I was like, how can you be so black and white to the outside world of the opinion that you and I share, that people like that are horrific and do not belong in society, yet you are that and I just couldn't get my head around it. I hated him. from that moment.
I heard you say this the other day, and it actually kept me up thinking. I'm trying to think, what's he trying to do there?
Mm-hmm.
And I wondered, is he conscious that you're going to see on TV that everybody is saying this guy who did the things he's doing is a monster?
Yeah.
And so he's trying to show you that's different to what I do.
What he is, yeah.
How old were you at that time, roughly?
I don't know when it broke out. So I think probably about 14, 15. I was still in high school. I know that much because there was a lot of struggle in high school, as you can imagine, going through kind of puberty, trying to fit in with everybody, learning about my body and learning about sex, which you never knew about before. And then suddenly realizing I do, this thing that is supposed to be sacred and you're supposed to do in relationships has actually been taken away from me, and so there was a lot of battle there. So I think that was about the age. And I just remember, even though I knew it was wrong, up until that point, I never hated him. I didn't like it. I didn't like what he was doing, but he was my dad. And remember, he grew me my whole life. He grew me to tell me that nobody else loved me. Nobody else wanted me. And actually, we could run away together. So to love him like I would love anyone else as a partner.
It's just extraordinary. I'm so sorry that this happened to you. And that now he's able to use this whole trans ideology, I suppose, to do the thing that most of us who are speaking out against some of the extreme aspects of it are most worried about. Because I sat with Peter Tatchell the other week and he was saying nobody is going to use those things to get away with it. Nobody would do that. No, he repeated that over and over. I was like, well, that's just, and then I would I would say, no, but what about this? And what about that? And he goes, well, that shouldn't happen, but nobody would do it. And it didn't make any sense. So tell me more about, since he's gotten into prison and how he's using trans.
So I had a phone call. I hadn't heard anything really from 2016 when he was sentenced. I had a phone call late 2021 to say, hey, he's up for release. He's up for parole. So you need to start preparing a statement. Obviously, this is like 5 years after his sentence. He was supposed to serve 10. So I'm like, what do you mean? Like, I was expecting at least 5 years of my life left before I had to face this.
Is that what, because I never understand with prison, is that because they often say you only actually serve half of it?
Yeah.
So was he given 10 years and then you get out at 5?
So he was given actually a European extended sentence, which the judge said was justified because of the level of his manipulation and his defence, which was he kept it in his family. So he's not a risk to society because he didn't do it to anybody else.
He should be locked up for life.
My argument was, if you can do that to your own child, what can you do to somebody else's?
Yeah.
So I was phoned and I was in shock, and it was kind of like okay, I'll leave that with you now. So obviously, thankfully, I had support around me and my family. Tried to prepare like a bit of a statement as to why I didn't think this should happen, and heard nothing till early 2022. When I was sat at home one morning, literally on my own with my small child, I had a phone call come up from the victim liaison officer, and I answered it, and she said, oh, just to let you know, he's no longer eligible for parole because of an altercation that happened like last year, which tells me he's done something, because if it was his parole and he hadn't done something, then why would it affect that? So he's done something. And he's given us permission for you to know that he's now Claire Fox. He's a woman.
That must have been a shock.
It was like she was telling me what she had for breakfast yesterday. It was like, oh yeah, by the way, he's given me, like, he's allowing me to know that he's a woman now, but actually he's just got a wig and changed his name.
Oh my God. And to the name, because in case people don't know who Claire Fox is, who is Claire Fox?
So Claire Fox is actually a lady in the House of Lords. She's very much for feminine rights, and she's made it very clear since kind of this story's come out about her feelings and thoughts towards obviously transitioning within sexual predators, or anyone really who's committed a crime. And he used her name, and this is proven that these perpetrators are doing this, because then you Google their name and Claire Fox comes up, the lady in the House of Lords. So, I mean, it doesn't now. He's probably regretting that. But
it comes up as him now, doesn't it?
It would, yeah. If you type in that, obviously she comes as well, but the stories come with it. But for me, if I wanted to become a male, I changed my first name to match a male name, right? I don't want to have my identity and change my last name. What's that about? That's hiding something. You're running away from something. And I just, it was from that moment I knew he's done this for a reason. He was segregated in prison. So obviously being female now, he was at risk of rape, assault.
But they segregated him to help him.
Yeah, because he's female. He's identifying as female. So now to male prisoners, he's a risk, isn't he?
Yeah.
So it's funny how someone who's just had an altercation is now suddenly given every segregation right that there possibly is. It's clever, really, when you think about it, but that shows how dangerous it is as well.
This is another issue that because this is a trans issue, I suppose it's an issue with the laws that we've changed without thought for safeguarding. And again, I had that debate, and Peter Tatchell was saying, you don't take rights away from trans women. And I said, no, you're giving extra rights to them. And this is a clear and cut case of somebody who's done bad things in prison and is now getting extra rights by pretending to be someone else. The other thing is the Claire Fox thing. In addition to, as you say, he's trying to, that way he's hiding and he can change his name and his life and everything. He's trolling, isn't he? He's being a troll. It's like Roxy Tickle. I don't know if you followed that story. Roxy Tickle was like this Australian man who wanted to be in an app only for women. So he changed his name to Roxy Tickle, which is like a porn star name. And it's like, you're trolling, but he won in court and was able to be in the women's app now. He's just a big burly bloke who hasn't really done anything else to try and be a woman. So what happened next? I mean, he's in prison. He's now a woman. He's segregated. What then?
So I was told he's up for parole again. Shortly after this, prepare your statement. This time it's going ahead. So I'm thinking, great, okay, this has come out of nowhere again. So I'm finally starting to get my life on track after this man has taken it all from me, and it's being thrown in my face. But it's very much you're on your own. He's getting all this segregation. He had his deed poll paid for by the prison service. He had his wig provided. Now, if I went into prison as a female, I wouldn't get my makeup paid for.
Really? Is that right then?
It was all paid for. It was all given to him.
But I read that and I just thought, that must be some sort of... I mean, Claire Fox, the actual Claire Fox said that. And I thought, maybe that's something that's just given to all women. And now I think about it, that's quite a large taxpayer expense to give makeup
isn't it?
to women.
Yeah, it's a luxury. Yeah. You don't get luxuries in prison unless you work and pay for them. But he wasn't. He was just handed it all. He was taking a picture with a blonde wig on, and everything that I'm sent correspondence-wise is all she, her, him. Him's gone. It's all she and her. And now I'm made to address him as her. I actually refused in my parole statement was very much him.
Were you admonished for doing that? No.
What could they do? I wasn't going to change.
Yeah.
You can't force me to say that the man who is still a man, he still has his genitals, is now a woman, and I should just call him that and respect that, because he definitely didn't respect me as I was growing up as a child.
Oh, man. So he was up for parole, and then he got it, did he?
Yeah. So the parole process was actually disgusting. So I was told I had no victim liaison officer at this time. I was kind of like in a grey area, just waiting for someone to be my victim liaison officer because I didn't have anyone. So I'm going for a parole hearing with no victim liaison officer, which is the only thing I'm entitled to as a victim, and told I have to join the parole hearing from Teams at home on my laptop.
Why was this?
Because I didn't have anyone. I had no victim liaison officer, so therefore I had nobody to support me. So it's like, if you want to do it, you can join in on Teams as if, I'm joining a work call, or I'm joining a Teams call with you or something. I'm therefore allowing this story into my home. I'm allowing this man into my home now, and I can't get away from that. If I go to a building and talk about it, I go home. But actually, I'm allowing this into my home. And it was only because I fought that I didn't have to do it there. But that was what they were saying. It wasn't my right to have any legal representation, but it was his. And it's crazy. And I just can't.
Have they explained why that is?
No, there's just no rights for victims. So I actually did a speech in the House of Lords regarding this, and they were all very much, why? How did we get here? What's went wrong? Well, what went wrong was we created laws and legislation for prisoners to make sure they kept their human rights in prison. But where's the laws and legislation for victims? There is none. So therefore, when it comes to a prisoner being released, the law and legislation is there. The police have to follow that. Victim liaisons have to follow that. They don't have to follow anything for victims. We have no rights. I was phoned and told he's going to be released into my local community because it was his human right to do that. But my human right of having to live next door to my abuser didn't matter.
That's insane.
It was irrelevant. and I was allowed a fireproof letterbox and a panic alarm. So I could live in a prison so he could be free.
A fireproof letterbox?
Yeah. They said a fireproof letterbox, CCTV, and a panic alarm.
What, in case he tries
In case he tried, because he absolutely would have tried something.
What, to set the house on, your house on fire?
He's a violent man. So it's all, to them, it's like, well, we can offer you these things and you can live next door to him, but we've given you these things, so it's fine.
Did he move to where you are?
No. Thankfully, I fought it, and I fought it hard.
You shouldn't have had to.
I shouldn't have had to. And do you know what I think? I'm actually lucky. I am really lucky. I have a voice, and I'm not afraid to use it. A lot of people wouldn't. I know a lot of women and men who are living next door to their abusers because they're too afraid to stand up. They don't want to stand up. They can't. And why should they have to? Why should they feel like they have to do that? That should be there for them. They shouldn't have to feel like the world's against them.
I was under the impression that when abusers leave prison, there are a whole load of rules about where they can and can't live, like not within a mile of a school or a park, and presumably not near their victims. I remember seeing like Louis Theroux documentaries. I know this is in America. There was the Coalinga one that he did over there. That was the name of the place. And when they got out, they had to go and live in these sort of strange homes where people were monitoring them. Is that just not the case in the UK?
No. And it's hidden. I know someone who was domestically abused. She lived in a block of flats. She had to move out of her own flat because her abuser was moving back in downstairs.
Oh my God.
So she would have to have walked past him every single day.
Why do we always give more rights to the perpetrators? And I'm not like some right wing because it can be a bit on the right. Like anyone who's committed a crime, you go to prison.
Yeah.
I don't believe we need. I think maybe we put people in prison too easily often. But that kind of crime, I just think throw away the key.
It's also the level, isn't it? It's the level of rights there because. Okay, some people can be rehabilitated. I personally don't think paedophiles are one of them, but that's my opinion.
I agree.
People can be rehabilitated in certain crimes, but when you are placing somebody like that above the right of the person that they, their rights they invaded, he took away my rights as a child, and that was to be safe. And he took those. And now his rights are above mine. So the man who thought he was powerful when he was doing these things and obviously thrived from this power, you're giving more power. What's that about?
I don't know where all I can think is the people who make the laws are often psychopaths. I know that's a bit simplistic, but people who get to the top are protecting one another. Because I don't know who it serves, because I know that, Hugh Edwards, for example, just didn't even see any prison time for what he did. And again, I don't want to sound like I'm being dramatic or whatever. He was the images he was viewing. He was contributing to doing the worst thing we can do in our society. Yeah. It's not the same as what your father was doing to you, but he to not go to prison at all. I just can't believe it. And people go to prison for like finance things. They go away for a couple of years. They go for longer than people who've done these kinds of abuses. And now he's using the trans thing and getting away with it. Like, who is this serving? Like, who is voting for this? This is not what we vote for in our democracy.
No. And on the flip side to the Hugh Edwards thing, I was told if I hadn't have spoke out, which I did try. I tried to refuse when the police were questioning me when they first came to my house because I was absolutely petrified. There's someone here who's finding out a secret that only this is all I've had control over my whole life. This is the only thing, is that I know who you are and it's up to me to tell people. Now all of a sudden it's not my control, it's theirs. So I refused. But if I hadn't have spoke out, which very nearly happened, I was told he would have got an 18-month suspended sentence for the images he had, which he took of me. So actually, in terms of the images and stuff, okay, people say, oh yeah, they're images, but actually there's so much more underneath these layers. People, Clive wasn't a pedophile until he was.
Interesting. What do you mean by that?
He was, until he was committed and found out of this crime, he wasn't a pedophile, was he? He would walk around the community and he would be Clive, the pillar of community who volunteered for St. John Ambulance and had 8 kids, and his son was really poorly and he really tried hard to work and build businesses for himself.
So the people in the community not know that he was a bit of a wrong un?
No.
He seemed just nice and all right.
Helpful, and then you go on from that to now he's a pedophile. So actually there is no kind of, he only took images, because there's so many more layers of that.
yeah, even if he had, I mean, doing that to your own daughter, again, I do think there are times in life where you just lock them up. I just don't.
Yeah.
I don't know who would say no, that's too long to put that person who's taken pictures of his own daughter and sent them out into the world. I don't know. I don't know who, apart from him, who would be like, oh no, that's not right. Let him out. Let's all advocacy for this person. So I don't know who that serves. So, and as you say, he was a pillar of the community, but now couldn't be because of what he's done.
Yeah.
Except he can now disguise himself as Claire Fox.
And he can be an advocate, can't he? You know, if I hadn't have spoke out, he would have been released into a community where maybe young, you know, male, female, whoever they are, want to come out, want to say that they're transgender, and they look up to someone who's done it middle-aged, who had 8 children and was married, and they think, wow, you've done that. And people admire that because it's brave, right? It's courage. But actually, he's done it to hide in a very, you know, at the moment, vulnerable community. And he's using it to his absolute advantage. So why is it now that this man who was this pillar of community, you know, obviously at home we knew very different. He was very violent and aggressive, but in the community he wasn't, is now again in the community doing what he did before.
This is why we have rules around men and women in different bathrooms, prisons, sports teams, all these kinds of things, because there might be not most trans people, but there might be people who will take advantage of it, which is what he's doing. That's why we have the laws and the rules. But you've also faced pushback from people in the trans community, is that right? Which is astounding, isn't it?
Yeah.
They should be on side with you.
Yeah, I know. This was my biggest fear. You know, I am somebody who believes that if you are not hurting anyone, you should be free to live your life. But ultimately, we are getting to a point where we are hurting people. And I'm not fighting a war that can't be won in terms of transgender and the trans ideology. You know, that is up to people. In my opinion, that is up to them. What I'm fighting here is actually a jump in safeguarding, a jump in legislation, a jump that me or you couldn't make. You know, we can't avoid a DBS check because we don't want to declare it. I might not want to say who I was previously. I changed my name.
Can they do that then?
Yeah.
So that's one of the. So not only can he go about the community and no one will know it's him, but he can. So DBS check. That's what is that? That's to check your police background.
Yeah. So if you're working with vulnerable people like children or elderly,
he can avoid this.
Yeah, absolutely. Because what do you need for a DBS check? You need a passport or driving license. You need a birth certificate, and you need a bank card. Well, he would have a driving license or passport in Claire Fox. He would have his birth certificate in Claire Fox because that gets changed, and he would have a bank card in Claire Fox. So actually, even though there's this transgender sensitive route where you go and you kind of say, I'm trans, blah, blah, and it doesn't show on your certificate, there's also the flip side that he could just submit a DBS form that says Claire Fox, provide his ID and all the stuff that he needs, and he has a clear DBS because they type in Claire Fox on the system and nothing's there. He's not committed any offences.
But hadn't he changed his name while he was still in prison? But I guess the offence had already been done.
Yeah.
But it wouldn't show up that he was in prison.
Not if he didn't declare his previous name. So if he didn't say, I'm Clive Bundy, but now I'm Claire Fox. There's no link.
And you've been, I mean, what are some of the things that people have said to you?
It doesn't happen.
That's the thing. Yeah. That's what Tatchell said.
Yeah, it doesn't happen. But I'm here to say it does, and it has.
You're living proof that it happens.
Absolutely. And what's really frustrating is that you're almost getting this thrown in your face that, you know, we have to allow for a minority in the trans community. You know, not there's a really small proportion of trans women who will, attack or cause any kind of violence to any other women. Okay, great. But I'm also a very small proportion of the world. And you're arguing with me. So who wins here? You know, you can't tell me that it doesn't happen when I'm telling you it does, but then tell me I have to accept that actually I have to walk into a bathroom with anyone, it could be anyone, and I have to accept that because it's for a minority. Well, where do we cross the line here? I've
also seen that the number of trans people in prison who are there for sexual crimes is like through the roof compared to men and women. I'm sure I can imagine that. I don't think we have the exact stats that outside of prison, those who have sexual whatever have committed crimes and those kinds of things, might be the same as men in general, right? Because as far as I'm concerned, trans women are just men, and but do your thing in private, have fun, go out to a party, go not just private, go out to party, do your thing, as long as it doesn't hurt other people. I imagine it's the same as men, but that's like me as a man saying just like, well, why do we need rules against safeguarding? Because I don't do anything wrong. Most men don't, and most men don't.
No.
But a very small percentage do. And most men then understand, like, okay, because of those men, I don't want my daughter or wife or just a woman I don't know being susceptible to that man. So I don't want that man in the women's toilet. Same reason I wouldn't want a trans woman in their toilet.
Exactly.
Most of them would never do anything.
No.
So they don't seem to. And where are they saying these things to you? I mean, you talked about off camera earlier, a battle of ideas. There were people getting upset at walking out. Was it?
Yeah. So they were. I went and did a speech at the Battle of Ideas last year. I was sat next to Kate Coleman, and she kind of delivered her factual evidence. I'm here to prove, my personal experience as evidence. And there was a lot of people there who kind of were wearing T-shirts saying, I am trans. Great, amazing. You're clearly trying to make me know that you are. You're here to argue with me. So Kate Coleman did her speech. There was a lot of gestures. There was a lot of noise. I said my speech and people got up and walked out. And it was almost like okay, I can't argue with it now, so I'm going to walk away. But I'll come back when, she's not there and I can argue it. And actually, people just want to argue for the sake of arguing. What it comes down to is we're not going to ever completely eradicate this. There are always going to be people out there who want to hurt other people. But it's about, this is why we have safeguarding in place, isn't it? This is why we do risk assessments, and we have to do it against the majority, not the minority, because ultimately we're not going to make laws and legislations that protect everyone. You're never going to do it. You would have to do it individually, and that's just not going to happen.
Yeah, I agree. Something you said before struck me as interesting. You said that it was your biggest fear that you would be seen as a transphobe.
Yeah.
What does that say about our society today? Because I think most people listening wouldn't blame you for feeling that way. That you've gone through the worst thing imaginable to most people, and yet your biggest fear is someone might call you a phobe of some sort.
That doesn't just impact me in terms of, how I feel, because like I say, I'm very much for people who live as you want to live as long as you don't hurt others. However, it's what that leads to. Everything I do, every interview I do, I risk losing my job, which then rolls down to my family, which then rolls down to my home. I don't just put myself on the risk here. I don't just cry at home because I'm called a transphobe. There's so much more to this. And it's because I'm speaking my opinion and trying to safeguard, young girls out there who are being abused today. Because it doesn't stop. It doesn't stop. And actually, what it comes down to is I'm risking my livelihood, which I have built from nothing. I've had nothing. I'm risking that now, all for the sake of saying what's happened and saying a truth and a reality. And it's like, I don't know how I can win against that.
That's a weird place to be in. A weird place to be in. And it's something I talk about a lot on this show, of course, just the oppressive nature of our society now, that even someone who's gone through what you've gone through, just pointing out and telling your story without saying anything inflammatory, your biggest fear now is that, because of course, you could lose absolutely everything. And you've built from such a difficult beginning. You've built, you speak wonderfully and eloquently. And I mean, how are you now? I think I saw that you have PTSD and you're overcoming those issues.
So I have PTSD and acute depression, and that doesn't go away. I manage it, as anyone would. PTSD affects me more overnight time. So in the day, I'm very in touch with myself, very in control. I'm confident in speaking about what happened to me. It helps me. But actually at night, when my subconscious takes over, I have nightmares where I'll literally sit up and I'll be shouting and screaming. And it's because what happened is still there. I can sit here, smiling, saying I'm lucky, saying all these things, but actually this is for life. The effect that this has on me is forever. And ultimately, it affects everything else. My little one, if they come to me and want some advice about sex when they're older, what's to say they're not going to be too afraid to ask because of what I've been through and they don't want to upset me? This doesn't just affect me, it affects everyone around me. And actually, that's something I have to live with daily. No matter how much I stand here or sit here and smile and say, yeah, great, okay, let's make sure that it's safe for everyone else. The reality is harsh and I have to deal with the consequences. I don't go home and smile and think, oh, that's another day's work done. It has an effect.
Do you have a relationship now and things like that? Are you able to enjoy being in a romantic relationship?
It's something that took a long time and still has an effect now. You know, Clive told me when I was younger that when we were 16, we'd run away together and we could be together forever. You know, he saw me as like someone he would marry, someone he would be with, which obviously wouldn't happen legally in this country. But to go from the one person in your life who you thought loved you and did everything in your best interest and thinking that they were the whole world, to then realizing how much they'd taken from you and how much they'd abused you, building any kind of romantic relationship is just unreal. And statistically, it doesn't happen. You know, people who are abused when they're young often don't have stable relationships because of that.
Yeah, no, I understand that. But it sounds like you're making a go of it.
Yeah, and that's why I'm lucky. You know, I have a home, I have a loving family around me, I have a career, I have a relationship, and I'm thriving. I absolutely am in comparison to most. And this is where I'm lucky, but this is why I've got to speak out.
Yeah.
Because it's for the people who can't.
And I respect that you do. I mean, that takes real courage. Most people in your situation don't do that, and that's understandable as well.
Absolutely.
How did your siblings and your mother react when it all came crashing down?
So it actually affected my siblings a lot more, and I think it still does. And it's crazy because when you think about it, you're like, whoa, what do you mean? How does that work? But actually, it's not a surprise to me. I knew who was this person the whole time. I knew my whole life he was a paedophile and that he was doing these things. So there was the shock factor for me was gone. You know, for my siblings, suddenly their father's taken away and they're told to accept the fact that he was a bad man, he's a paedophile, and he did these things to me. How do you as an older brother cope with the fact that your younger sister was, you know, raped in her house and there was nothing you could do? It could have completely broke us. Some of us it has. But we're a unit and we're strong and we're very lucky to have each other. Unfortunately, I have no relationship with my mother. That's a lot of things that kind of went up in the air. A lot of my own theories I kind of have from that. And, you know, that's something I live with every day. I live with the fact that I'm 26 and I am technically an orphan. I have no parents. I raise myself and I'll continue to do that, but with the support of my siblings around me.
How have you ended up seeming so well-rounded?
I think for me, I absolutely love helping people. That's why I did what I did. You know, I did what my father wanted me to do because I didn't want my little sister to do it. You know, that helped me cope. Okay, you've done that, but look who you've saved. I remember sitting on the end of her bed at night crying, looking at her thinking, I'm so glad that you don't have to go through this, but hating the world for the fact that I did. And I think for me, the thought of staying strong and being strong for them keeps me going. It doesn't happen all the time. I've had really, really low points in my life. I was nearly sectioned. I had multiple suicide attempts. I didn't want to be here anymore. Because I thought that the abuse was me, and it's not. But it's taken me a long time to do that. And I think when you think about it, I've been out of the abuse a lot less time than I was in it, and there's still a long way to go.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's a reminder, all of those things you've been going through, for anyone who does try to suggest, and people do this, that abuse of, you know, that it's not as bad as all that. I mean, it ruins people's lives. It's you're a different person after the abuse happens. That's what I've seen every time I've spoken to somebody who's gone through it. Do you think there is a part of Clive that believes that he is a woman?
No.
Nothing?
Not at all. This man was incredibly proud of being male, incredibly proud when he had a little girl masturbating on him. And the thought that he now can still go around as he was and tell people that the reason he did what he did was because maybe he felt a bit like he should have been a woman, and he was intrigued by that.
Is he telling people that?
That's what the victim liaison officer said when she first told me, was that this is one of the reasons why, because he wanted to be in touch with his feminine side. Okay, great. But at the same time, that means then that he takes away any kind of innocence of a child. That's not an excuse. That's not okay. And actually, the fact that he's trying to make it that shows how dangerous and manipulative that man is. You know, he's not only manipulated me as a child, he's manipulated everyone around him, a whole parole board, a justice system. It's all his.
Despite all that, though, I mean, he must regret, I mean, it was a bit of trolling or whatever with the name Claire Fox, but because of that, it made the news. And now presumably everybody knows that this person pretending to be Claire Fox is actually this person who's committed such heinous crimes.
What he's done there is he's tried to pop up out of the woodwork like, hey, look, it's me. And by the way, I'm still in control because I've given you permission. So I'm still in control here because I'm allowing you to know that. What he didn't realise was I've actually not allowed what he did to consume me. I've allowed it to drive me. And unfortunately for him, there's no getting away from it because I won't allow him to feel like he's won because he hasn't.
You took control of the narrative, and
absolutely.
Now people know exactly who Claire Fox. There's that Claire Fox. It's Clive.
Yeah.
Gosh, if you were sort of in his home now, wherever he is he sat there with a wig on and all of that stuff, or is he probably just being him?
He's been spotted as a male in the local community where he shouldn't be.
God.
Unfortunately, these people haven't phoned the police and haven't kind of reported it. So for me to try and actually ring the victim liaison officer and kind of be like, hey, by the way, he's as a man, I can't do that. That's up for them to do. You know, It could be harassment if I'm continuously phoning and saying, oh, he's been spotted here, he's been spotted here. You know, that was told to me. It could be classed as harassment, which is absurd and ludicrous. But, you know, again, that's the law, that's the legislation, isn't it? He's supposed to be allowed to live a free life. But actually what he's doing here is he's walking around the community where he's based in a wig and leaving the community as a male. And them two people are different, aren't they? He's not that person. So you look at CCTV of him in a wig, you look at CCTV of him elsewhere, not in that wig, suddenly he's changed, isn't he? And he can't be spotted easy.
Did being trying to pretend he was a woman get him out of prison earlier, do you think?
Yeah, absolutely. You imagine how much our prisons are full. We know that. Okay, yeah. I don't have to go into that. Everybody knows that. It's all we've heard for the last I don't even know how long. So imagine now paying for someone to be segregated away from everyone else, showers, food, everything. Imagine how much money and pressure that puts on the prison service. So even though they won't hold their hands up publicly and say it, I've absolutely heard from reliable sources that is exactly the reason why they have released him.
Really? What sources told you?
So one of my advocates, one of my independent sexual violence advocate said this happens, and it happens because of exactly the reasons I said. You know, there's so much more to this story that I would love to say, but I can't because I have nobody who's willing to come out and say it because they're so afraid of losing their job, so afraid of the backlash. And I'm just a person, aren't I? And I'm a person that will be argued with because what degrees do I hold? What do I know?
What kind of person would argue with you on this, though? I always try to see the other side of things, you know, and I can't see it here. This is one of the rare times where I'm thinking, I mean, of course, I understand that most trans people would never do anything like this, and that you're not even speaking about a trans person because you're saying this person is not that, but is making use of the loophole from what I think is unfortunately a crazy law that we've allowed with regards to self-ID and those kinds of things, and that they're now calling him. In what world do they not go, Clive, shut up, get back to your cell? Yeah, you know, you're not having a wig. What world is this right now? I don't, and that's the good side. That's the virtuous side. That's the people doing good and getting him out of prison. Is that, do you think, the difference between looking good and actually doing good? Like they look good, the prison and other people have helped him now by helping out, but they're actually not interested in doing good.
It's a tick box exercise, isn't it? You know, to them, look at us, we're being really accepting. We're being great. We're being really, you know, we're providing things for this. We're allowing this. So look how good we are. Look how amazing of a country we are to allow this. When actually they're not thinking about the fact that everything that he has taken, he's now taking again. He is now taken a new identity. He has run away from the old one. And it's almost as if all the abuse that he put on myself is ignored. It's gone. It didn't happen because Clive Bundy no longer exists. He is Claire Fox.
When you are speaking with people who disagree with you, do they refer to Clive as she?
Yeah. There's been multiple times. I mean, the parole board statement is all it said was she, her. She, her. Great. Okay, so I will read that as knowing the man that he was, and I have to accept that because ultimately his rights are way above mine.
It must be so bizarre for you to have to read these statements, knowing what he is and what he's done to you, and have to read she, because there is almost, even if it's not said, there's kind of a she's a victim element, isn't there?
Yeah.
Like poor she's a bit confused and she didn't know she was a she.
And that's why she did this, because she went through a whole time where she was so confused with herself. She was just exploring. Children naturally explore, don't they? Young children explore with their bodies because they don't know. And we have to learn. Not a 40-year-old grown man with 8 children. He does not explore bodies. That's not what happens. And I think for me, the fact that this was allowed and then I was left to deal with it on my own was absolutely disgusting. I remember FaceTiming my siblings and saying to them, having to deliver the news that he is now a woman. They laughed down the phone at me. They told me I was lying. They told me that's not true, because none of them believed that he ever would be. And I had to really take time to break that to them. Why was that on me? Why was that for me to do? But unfortunately, it didn't matter about me, did it? It mattered about him.
It's extraordinary. Is there any kind of, can something be done? Is there, other than speaking out publicly as you're doing, is there a way to kind of get the prison system to acknowledge that they made a mistake here?
I think the only thing I've known is to continuously keep it in their faces and to continuously tell them that this is not okay. Obviously, that happens with the more people who push it. I'm one person from a little town, and I'm trying to make a difference in a country of millions of people. I can't do it alone. And I think the only way to get anyone to face these facts is to continuously put it in their face and make them do it. I think for me, I've been asked the question, how? What do we do? Well, I'm not paid the hundreds of £1,000s a year to figure that out. There's people much smarter out there than me to figure that out. What I'm saying here is that there is an incident that has happened, and this is one person. So imagine the amount of people that are out there and haven't spoke. They've got to be out there. If I hadn't have spoke, you still wouldn't know about me. So ultimately, statistics don't matter. What matters is the people coming forward and showing the world that we have a problem.
Has this made you a little bit wary? You spoke of, a man in his 40s doesn't suddenly start exploring. A little bit wary of 40-year-olds, 50-year-old men who start to come out as trans.
Massively. And that hurts as well, because I am an accepting person. And I like to think that I would do anything for anyone. However, the fact that I'm now questioning people all the time who may or even not be trans, I am always aware that somebody walking into the swimming baths when I'm changing my child, because they're open, could be there for the wrong reasons. They could be there for the wrong intentions, and there's nothing I can do about that. Because
what are the rules right now in the laws? I mean, is it just depending on the club or institution or changing room, or is it like self-ID, like a man who says he's a woman can go into the women's changing room?
I think that's just an acceptance in society now. As a worker in reception, are you going to question someone who's got long blonde hair walking into a female changing room? Are you going to be the one to go up to them and say you can't be here? Are you going to be the one to put your job on the line for that? Probably not.
And that's horrific for you to see. I mean, it still seems like a small percentage of society, isn't it? I mean, have you seen that in changing rooms? Are you often in changing rooms and things?
Yeah, so my little one has swimming lessons all the time.
Okay.
So I'm very aware of people in and out. My niece is from a small village in Wales, and she used to go to swimming lessons. Clive knew my niece when she was born. He wasn't arrested at that point. And it was only when he came out as Claire Fox that we suddenly realised she's being let into these changing rooms that don't have cubicles. They're like very much the old kind of benches, very open. She's going in there on her own to get changed, and Clive could be in there and we wouldn't know. You know, the reality is massive.
It's actually almost impossibly difficult to imagine that he is not right now going into lots of women's changing rooms and using this to look at more girls.
I imagine he is, yeah. And it was actually told to me by his neighbour, because she got in contact with me after the Daily Mail article to say that she knows where he lives, because that wasn't my right either. I wasn't allowed to know where in the country he was. She got in touch with me to say she knows where he lives. And she said that the local library there had actually reported him because he'd gone into children's reading sessions and was sat there.
Oh my God.
And this is after he's been released.
And they lowered the sentence because they didn't think he was a danger to people outside of you, which is like, it's the most naive thing I've ever heard ever in my life.
So the parole statement actually says that Clive admits to finding children as sexually attractive, admits to not caring or understanding any harm that he's causing when he's abusing children, and admits to thinking he can have sex as and when he wants. But actually, the only thing in the statement, and the only reason why they decided that he was allowed to be released, was because he had a good relationship with prison staff.
Wow.
There was nothing else. He wasn't rehabilitated. He didn't undertake a rehabilitation program, and that's because there's no female credited rehabilitation programs in prison. So now all of a sudden this pedophile can't be a pedophile because he's a woman, and there's no rehabilitation programs for women.
That's insane. That's okay. I mean, I people need to start speaking. I mean, you've been, it's incredible the job you're doing, and more people, and loads of people are. I mean, Kate Coleman, as you say, and these people are heroes in raising this issue. But more people who are not typically political, I think, have to now get involved, because this is a huge problem. It
is a war, and that's a big term to throw. But I am one person, and there's been campaigners after campaigners trying to fight this, but ultimately they are just speaking through stories that they've heard or things that they've seen. We need people who it's happening to say, actually, no, it's happening to me as well. And that's massive, and that's huge, and they should never have had to come to this point. I shouldn't be here. This should be something that happens naturally in society. But unfortunately, it doesn't. And the only way to change that is to stand up to these people and say, it is wrong and it is happening.
And the fact that he got all chummy with the wardens and all. You know.
He held a trusted job in prison, is what it says on his...
Do you know what it was?
No, just says he held a trusted job. Great. Okay. So you're telling me that means then he's not going to feel empowered and like he can then go and abuse children again, because now he's manipulated other people around him. He's done what he's good at, and he's manipulated his whole way through.
Do you think the people responsible for the parole and the sentencing and things are influenced a little bit by what we would call the woke sort of rise of the last few years, and they're maybe scared for their own jobs and lives and things?
Massively. And I think as well, the thing that frustrated me is I opted to read my victim's statement to the parole board because I felt like that was more empowering than them reading it off a black and white piece of paper. I could get across my tone and how really strongly I felt about everything I had to say. They read it the day before I even read it to them. So actually the fact of offering me to read it in person was just a tick box exercise, because they'd already read it. They knew what was in it. And I did not feel like any of them were listening or engaging. I mean, that's hard on Teams anyway, right? It's hard to know if anyone is listening anyway. But when they're looking away from screens and you know they've already read it, you think, what am I doing this for? It's pointless. You've already made up your mind.
Oh my God, it's awful. Is there anything about this that I've not asked you that you think is pertinent?
I think there's a lot. And I think there's a lot that I could sit here and talk about. For me, the most important thing here is the fact that this does happen. It has happened and it will continue to happen. We can't keep sweeping it under the carpet because one extra person is too many. And unfortunately, nothing's going to change until we face it.
With regards to the issues that you don't want to talk about, is that for fear of offending people?
I think there's a mixture. I'm quite outspoken, and I will argue my point. I will argue fact, and that this is my story, and that is it. You can't change it because it happened. It is me. However, I think there comes a point where you put so much of yourself on the line after losing so much of yourself. How much more do you want to give? So actually, there is that fear there. I think for me, mentally, I have to be careful as well about how much I divulge, what I say.
Would that be about the abuse itself?
Yeah, and obviously everything in between, because ultimately each day this is spoke about, I relive 10 days of the abuse. You know, I go home and I see everything that happened again. You know, I see my father walking through the bedroom door knowing what he's going to do. I see him taking off his dressing gown, naked, and I know what's coming next. And I'm reliving that life. I see it as like a Russian doll. So you think of a Russian doll and they'll grow and I'll grow and I'll grow and there'll be more layers. But actually at the core of that Russian doll is me, is my childhood, is that 9-year-old girl who was raped by her father and ultimately didn't have a voice. And that's hard to break.
Where was your mum all of this time?
Not there.
Anyway, I you know, like you know.
Yeah.
I'm so angered by this, and I think many people watching will be as well. If people want to help, where can they go to? How can they follow you? Things like that.
So I am on X. I'm not great with it. And yeah, for me, that's probably the main place that they can go to. Okay. Obviously, I am trying to work on more things, trying to get the story out there to consistently be heard, in the hope that someone somewhere listens and changes what we need to be changed.
We'll put a link below to your ex. It's Ceri-Lee Galvin. If they just type that, I found it that way as well.
Yeah.
You don't
I'm one of a few.
Yeah, you don't update that much
No.
on the Twitter. Who is a heretic you admire?
Katie Piper.
Tell me about Katie Piper.
So as a little girl, even though it was obviously a very different story, I admired the way that she could have allowed what happened to her to consume her. She could have, in society's eyes, allowed that man to win. She didn't. She used it to drive her, and she has made a massive change to women and men who are hurt, who are stalked, who are domestically abused.
What, just in case like non-Brits might not know who she is, so what's her thing?
So with her story, she broke up with her ex-boyfriend. I've actually forgot his name. He stalked her, and himself, an accomplice, attacked her with acid, threw acid in her face. She ended up with, we probably can't even comprehend the amount of issues, surgeries, complications that she went through. And she ended up being very different to the person she was before. She was hurt physically, and I'm sure it took a lot for her to get through mentally. So I think for me, watching her use that and use any platform she could to raise awareness for that was massive. And I think she's amazing.
Daniel Lynch, I've got here, is the name of the man.
I had Sean in my head and I don't know why.
And the latest news that he has a rare 2-day parole hearing. That was in July. So I don't know if we have more news about that, but obviously he's saying he's a reformed
I knew it was
character.
Coming up, yeah.
Bloody hell. Well, people, please do go follow on Twitter. It is Ceri-Lee Galvin is where you'll find it. We've got a link below, and hit the like. Keep watching the channel and share this video. I mean, people need to know about it. People need to be angry about it. And I hope you're as angry as I think we feel right now.